me, at least it's not boring. Joining me in the studio now, TalkTV's chief political commentator, Peter Cardwell. Good to see you, Peter.
Hi.
And down the line, we're joined by Aubrey Allegretti, the chief political correspondent at The Times, and James Heal, political correspondent at The Spectator. Much to enjoy there, I would say. Particularly the comparison with an episode of EastEnders.
You know, it is sort of the Mitchell brothers getting very annoyed about it. Maybe it's the psychodrama between Frank and Peggy and Pat Butcher. Yeah. There's a lot going on there, and it is a bit of a soap opera. And certainly, Prime Minister's Questions today was not an edifying spectacle. There were lots of insults. That was just a flavour of the insults, Vanessa. There were other bits as well where people were talking about Keir Starmer, a new insult against Rishi Sunak, saying that he was making money during the off the back of the financial crisis, betting against poor people and making millions. Although a reference to the financial crisis under a Labour government, maybe that wasn't the best thought, perhaps. But yes, it's very, very fractious. The Sir Simon Clarke thing, I think, has gone nowhere. It's a total tumbleweed. There are only two Conservative MPs on the record saying Rishi Sunak should go, Sir Simon Clarke and another MP called Andrea Jenkins. So really, Rishi Sunak actually, bizarrely, might be bolstered by that affair. But Prime Minister's Questions today, very difficult for him. Not sure it'll make a huge difference. And of course, Labour 27 points ahead in the latest YouGov poll and no movement in those polls. In fact, the government hasn't been ahead, Conservatives haven't been ahead in a poll in 2 years.
Aubrey Allegretti, I mean, obviously, this is great fun and frolicsome if this is what you do for a living, write about the hilarity and the bants at Prime Minister's Question Time. But if you're an actual person trying to make a living, trying to get a hospital appointment, trying to get a place at school for your kids, maybe it's not quite so funny.
No, certainly not. And that's the point that senior ministers have been making today, saying that the country will punish them more harshly if they sort of indulge in yet another round of navel-gazing. They believe that sort of stringing out an internal party row leading to a sort of slew of no-confidence letters being submitted over a long period of time, and then the sort of rigmarole of having to go through a leadership contest is the very last thing the country needs. And indeed, in sort of private WhatsApps from Conservative MPs they were exchanging overnight, that's what they were saying. They said so much of what was coming up on the doorsteps from voters was frustration about the party being divided, sort of too inward focused, and that there were plenty more issues that politicians should be devoting their time to instead.
James cleverly had something to say about this. Let's hear it, and then James Heal can tell me what he thinks.
I could not disagree with him more on this particular issue. The Prime Minister has been clear in his plan for government to reduce inflation, which is reduced by more than a half, to get the economy growing again, to stop the boats, and we've seen over a third reduction last year when across the rest of Europe those numbers are going up. He is absolutely determined to drive this government further in the delivery of the plan. And if we were to do something as foolish as have an internal argument at this stage, all it would do is open the door for Keir Starmer.
What do you think of that, James Heal?
Well, I think really it shows that in the Conservative Party, Simon Clarke doesn't have a huge amount of support on the backbenches nor on the front bench. And, you know, unless a senior cabinet member like James Cleverly or Kevin Badenoch were to resign, I really can't see this going anywhere right now. And I think what's been very telling today is that there's been silence or outright anger on a lot of those WhatsApp groups. And talking to MPs in and around the House, they've just been saying, look, you know, these criticisms are merely a refurthering and strengthening of Simon Clarke's previous outspoken comments about the government. So I don't think this does amount to a real challenge to Rishi Sunak right now. I think the next big thing is going to be not necessarily internal in the party, but external, which is going to be those elections coming up, either in the by-elections next month or in May. And I think another big set of results in May, big defeat to Rishi Sunak, will lead to some more speculation. But right now, I don't think we're in that conversation at all.
Let me bring Peter in on this conversation about who understands Britain better, who gets it. Is it Rishi Sunak? Is it Keir Starmer? The national culture, what we're really concerned about, what we care about. It's always a bit infuriating having other people tell us what it is we really care about. But yes, when they are accusing each other of not knowing and they know and the other one doesn't, are you convinced by either side?
I don't think either of them is in touch with real people necessarily. Sir Keir Starmer, both of them have lived a life that many people don't live. They have an income that many people don't have. They have the kind of life experiences that very, very few people get, either Rishi Sunak running a hedge fund or Keir Starmer being the Director of Public Prosecutions. That is very different. And I think sometimes people just want, they don't really, they want a politician to understand, but they don't want them to necessarily live their life, as long as they're competent necessarily. I mean, Boris Johnson was the kind of archetypal person people said you could go down the pub and have a pint with. But people still realise that his life and his life experiences were very, very different. There is this repeated idea from Keir Starmer that he's trying to paint Rishi Sunak as out of touch without actually mentioning all the time, by the way, Rishi Sunak, you have loads and loads of money. And it's interesting from that perspective, but also I think the public just want competent government. And when they talk about the cost of living, three big issues: cost of living, NHS, sort of immigration environment in the third place there. Every poll, or many polls, would suggest that. Well, they just want competent leadership. They're not feeling they're getting that from Rishi Sunak at the moment, but still the jury is out on whether Keir Starmer would actually deliver that. There's no great enthusiasm for him as a person, although he is more popular than Rishi Sunak in many polls, including in a poll in Rishi Sunak's own constituency, so that's worrying for him.
Certainly. Aubrey Allegretti, the idea that Keir Starmer has form on various issues, form on all the things the Prime Minister accused him of thinking, not knowing what a woman is, and everything else. I mean, do you think that Rishi Sunak was actually on quite firm ground with that volley of criticism at Keir Starmer?
Well, certainly, I think the way that Rishi Sunak is thinking he can sort of attack the Labour leader is by painting him as sort of untrustworthy. The biggest attack line the Conservatives have at the moment is trying to suggest that Labour is flip-flopping on its big sort of green investment spending plans. So the £28 billion investment that were announced initially, which then got watered down to up to £28 billion. So those are the sorts of areas where economically the government is trying to paint Labour as untrustworthy and tell voters, best of the devil you know, stick with us, don't risk the change. I suppose the problem is that people will just ask, is it worth sticking with this party if I don't feel any better off? And we heard even from an MP today speaking in Prime Minister's questions on the Conservative benches about the cost of living effects still being felt very acutely. Voters may decide that if the economy is the number one argument, they think, well, maybe it's worth a risk because how much worse can it get?